Before we start this video, a large thank you to Lucas, Hexulus, Sebman, Blink MSP, Cappy Drake, Uwu, 3000, Paul Swanson, and Wang Nevin for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And an immense thank you to Halo Burner for the continued support to the channel this month on Patreon. As always, my friend, it is sincerely, greatly appreciated, and I hope you enjoy the video. Good day, everybody. I want to apologize ahead of time for my voice. I'm definitely losing it, but we're going to continue. I'm going to go to the items folder. I'm going to make a new C# script. I'm going to call this equipment model. And this isn't really an actual item, so I'm just going to give it its own folder so we don't accidentally click this in the future when coming back here, because it's just like, it's not an item, but it has to do with items, so I figure this is a pretty good spot to stash it. So in this video, we're going to learn how to equip actual models to your character when you equip an armor piece. I'm going to delete the start and update functionality as is per tradition, drop my namespace. Now, I'm going to keep this video more simple, and we're only going to focus on one first, the head model, and we're only going to use just a really simple like cube and a sphere, so you don't need any crazy models to actually do this. I'm going to make this a scriptable object and create asset menu. Going to make it just create asset menu name from a equipment model. Now, in the next video, I'm going to use a complex model on the asset store so I can cover as many different angles as possible and show you how I would set things up with a model that's very complex. But again, you don't need to do that for the tutorial. You can put in this logic and actually just not worry about the models till you get your own model. You don't need to go and buy an asset. It's not important, especially if you're just learning. Just throw some cubes and spheres as child objects under your regular model and you're good to go. But if you have your own model, that's great. That's fantastic. But again, don't feel like you need to buy something. It's really not required. You can still learn this without having the model ready currently. So let's make this require. We're going to make a function here at load model. Let's make it require a player manager and a bool for if we are a male. You could just not require this bool and get this from the player network manager when we make it as a network variable, but I'm going to put it here for now just for the simplistic sake of it. And if you want, you can make it require an equipment material if you want to reuse the same models but change their materials so you got recolors of stuff depending on different armor items. I do this in Nephilim for a few things because I use some of the same pieces across different armor sets. Like some armors share the same elbow guards and knee pads, etc., etc. Now, go over to our enums, and you see how we have weapon model type? We're going to make an enum for equipment model type. And again, don't get overwhelmed. I'm going to type out everyone we're going to use across this tutorial, but we're only going to use full helmet this video. That's it. Don't worry about anything else. It's just here, so it's already written out. So full helmet, half helmet, and then we're going to go with hood. And what do these separate? Well, these are going to decide what pieces of the gear you're taking off and putting on, and also what pieces of your body you hide. So with your full helmet, you always hide your full face, your hair. With open helmet, you're going to always hide your hair. With hood, same thing. You might hide your beard sometimes too with the open helmet ones. Again, don't worry about this right now. Don't stress out. We're just putting it here, so it's already here. Helmet accessories, face cover, torso, back, so like your capes and stuff. Right shoulder, left shoulder, or right shoulder, upper arm, sorry. Right elbow we need for elbow pads. Right lower arm. And you might not use all these with your armor, with your model. It could be a lot more simplistic. I'm covering the most complex version I can think of. And here it is when it's done. This is everything I'm going to use. Just so we cover all bases, and I'm going to try to keep the tutorial as general as possible. You could have a lot more simplistic placement than this. If that's the case, you won't need all these different pieces. But I'm going to just include them all to do the most complex version, just in case your model is very complex. Make it as simplistic as you need to. So back over here on the equipment model script, let's make a variable for equipment model type as in our enum. And then we're going to call this equipment model type. So then we see we have name female and name male. What's this? Well, a lot of times on models, people will give different models for their male and female versions. You might fit them to their body better. So I'm going to include both just in case you want to do that. Sometimes you just have a single model you want to use, and that's all right too. But I'm going to do a version for both in case you want to do that. So just edit this as you need to. I'm going to keep it very general, and I'm going to try to include everything that I can. So load model, what are we going to do? Well, let's actually divide this into two separate functions right away to keep it even more clean. We can load the male model or load the female model. And then we're just going to do a simple check, obviously, with the is male status, just in case you have different model types that fit to your character differently. So the same piece of armor could look different on a male and a female, for example. We're going to say load male model if is male, and then we're going to say else load female model. Let's also make these functions require our player manager. and then we can pass the player. Now, this is primarily how it's going to work out, and then from here we're going to just check for a list depending on what item equipment model we have. So for example, if this is a helmet, we check all the helmets, and then we enable the model under the helmet list or array that matches the name of this one. So that's it. Now we got to make that list, obviously, but it's very, very simple. Now, it's simple, but we have to do this with every model, so you can see how it's a lot, right? But don't get overwhelmed because there's a lot of things to do. The process itself is the same every time, and it's very, very simple. After you learn how to do one with your helmet, you could go ahead and do the whole model if you wanted to. And I encourage you to do that when this video is over. If you have a model that's complex and you want to go and take a dive or a crack at it before I jump back in the next video, totally go ahead and do that. Alright, so I'm going to go to the player equipment manager now, and you can see here we have our old load head equipment functionality. The first one is unload old head equipment models, so yeah, let's do that. Let's make a private void unload head equipment models. So we don't have any currently, and by that I mean we don't have like an array or a list, so we're going to have to make that in a moment. So what would we need to do here? Well, let's go up here to our variables. Let's make a header, and I'm just going to make male models for now. I'm only going to worry about this just for the example of the video, just trying to get you to understand the system before we actually go and add everything in. So in the future, there'll be one for females too, obviously, but for now, let's just make a public game object. So this is the parent object, male full helmets objects. Now, why am I doing it like this? Well, if you want to add armor as your game development goes on, if you use a parent and get every piece in the child as objects, you don't need to go back and manually edit your list. So we're going to do that. Be very helpful if you keep wanting to add additions to your game, and it will just auto-populate the list for you. So we have a hide and inspector public game object array, male head full helmets. And they're going to, this array is going to be the child or children of the male full helmet object. So to do that, we need to make a list under awake. You can also make this own initialize function if you want, like you do with weapon slots, it's okay. But for now, I'll keep it here. So the list is called male full helmets list. We're going to initialize that as a new list of game objects. And then for each, and we're going to say transform. And the transform is going to be child of this object we have up here. So male full helmet object. We're going to say male full helmets list.add child.gameObject, and then we convert the list to an array, and we initialize. Oh, we got to say male full helmet object.transform. It's my bad. And then we convert the list to an array, and we assign that array to our male head full helmets array. So we do that by saying male head full helmets is equal to male full helmets list.toArray, and that's it. So what do we do now? Well, let's go to our player prefab here, and let's actually make this object. So I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to go to the head here. And again, you're not going to do this with an actual model. You'll have the armor probably somewhere else. But I'm going to go to the neck and then the head, just so it parents to it. I'm going to right-click, create an empty game object. Again, this is just for an example. We're going to delete this after we use an actual model. I'm going to call this helmets object. I'm going to create a cube in here. I'm going to size it to its head so it kind of resembles something of a helmet to the best of its ability. And then I am going to make another object in here. Actually, let's also rename this to cube helmet. There we go. Now it's a helmet. Let's go to 3D object and let's make a sphere. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to call it sphere helmet. I'm going to resize it so this abomination is something resembling a helmet. I'm going to place that up here. There we go. Looks great. As good as it can, I suppose. And I'm going to disable these two objects here. So let's highlight them both and just make sure they are set to inactive. Now let's drag in our helmets object here to our parent, like so. And we are good to go. Let's save the prefab. Alright, jump back into the player equipment manager. I'm actually going to not hide that in the inspector just so I can see it, make sure it's working. So if I jump into the game here, you can see, yep, our male head full helmets list, or array rather, did populate. So that's working as intended. Cool. On to the next step. Let's go over to our unload head equipment. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a for each loop. We're going to search for models in our male full head helmets array, and we're going to disable every single model by saying model.setActive false. So the first thing you do, obviously, when equipping a new piece of armor is to disable all other pieces you might have had on. And then I'm going to make a comment down here for future, re-enable the head object, and then re-enable the hair object if you have them. So if you're unloading a helmet, you want to just re-enable your head. So I will now call this function here under the comment number 1 of load head equipment. And then under comment number 2, if the head equipment is null, simply set equipment and inventory to null and return. We can do that easy enough. We can say if the equipment is null, player.player inventory manager dot head equipment is equal to null, and then we just do a return. So then you'll still unequip the helmet equipment. So you'll still take off the helmet basically. All right, we can copy that, and likewise number 4, we could set the helmet or head equipment to the equipment we passed. If it's not null, cool. If you have those on unequip calls, call them there. That's cool if you want to do that. Now, load head equipment models. We want to do a for each, and we're going to say for each model under the equipment.models array, which we didn't actually make yet. I think it's like pseudocode right now. Let's jump over to that. So let's go to the armor item. Here it is. And yeah, armor models. It is still pseudocode. So we can make a public array of equipment models. Now I say array because some equipment will have more than one. For example, chest plates will have your torso, your upper arms, your elbow pads, your shoulder pads. But a full face helmet might just have the one model. So we're starting with helmets because it's very simple to showcase and it is just the one model. So we can say model dot load model. And then we pass the player, and I'm just going to say true for Ismail for now, because it's just always going to be for this example, and that looks good. So let's jump back over into our project, and let's duplicate the helmet, Knight's Helm. I'm going to call this, it's called Knight's Helm B, just for the example. Now, you can see here we have the equipment models array, and we don't have anything here yet. So let's go to the items folder, let's create a new folder, and let's call this armor models. Let's go in here, let's right click, or actually I'm going to drag into armor folder first. I'm also going to put an underscore here so it's always at the top, because this isn't technically armor, it's just the actual models. Right click, create equipment model, and I'm going to call this Knight's Helm model, and then Knight's Helm model B. So full helmet, yep, that's cool, that's what we need. That's good, it's already on the right one. And now, the name, let's go to our player prefab, and let's copy the name we made for our helmets. Cube helmet. Control C. I accidentally unlocked my inspector here, so I'm going to find my helmet again. And I'm just going to paste both in the male and female, because right now the female one doesn't matter. And I'm going to do the same thing with my second helmet. It will be the sphere helmet. Alright, cool. Looking good. Now, for those of you who use Parallsync, you might want to rebuild your project if you have any weird oddities, like not being able to connect. Sometimes things just don't work as they should. I saw some people commenting below, but if you are finding you can't connect, just try deleting your project and rebuilding it. Now, drag these models into the equipment models variable here for each of these helmets, and then add your new helmet to the world item database. That's very important, especially for the final part of this video. Now, under load mail model, we're going to do a switch, and we're going to autofill the equipment model type. And we're only using the first one here, full helmet. So what do we do here? Well, we're just essentially going to look through the array of helmets, and if the name matches the name here on this model, we're going to enable it. So for each item in the player.player equipment manager.mail full helmet objects, or mail full helmets, sorry, we're going to say if, and I don't like this is called item, let's change that to model. That's just me wanting specific naming conventions. It doesn't really matter at all. We're going to say if model.gameObject.name is equal to our mail equipment name. And then we want to set that specific, and this mail equipment name, by the way, this variable up here, we want to set that specific game object to be active by saying model.gameObject.setActive true. Now, if you have a custom variable for a material and you want to assign it, this is the place you do it. And I'll even write the code out here for you. I'm just copying this from Nephilim because I do this too. I reuse the same shoulder pads or elbow pads or different pieces, for example. So I'll say model.gameObject.getComponent, and then you want to get the renderer. I'm just going to write this out proper for you. Then you want to say dot material is equal to, and you want to instantiate a version of the material you already have. That way, if you're editing any color properties on it, you're not going to change the actual default material. All right, cool. And I'm going to save that. Now I'm going to go over to our debug equipment items. I'm going to erase this check for a null. And why am I doing that? Because it doesn't matter now. We're already checking for null in this function. And if we do have a null, it simply unequips our helmet. So that's good. We want that. Now, if I jump to the game and I add a, let's go, where's my character here? I'm going to add a Knight's Helmet A. And I tick this equipment items. Boom, look at that. We're wearing a box. Now if let's just test B2 to make sure this works actually. Knight's Helmet B, equip, boom, yes, we are wearing a sphere. That one looks really creepy. Now I'm going to equip nothing, and there the helmet comes off. Cool, so that is all working as intended. Now, what about getting this working for multiplayer? It's very simple, super simple. The easiest part of the video, I'm going to say. Go to your player network manager, and we're going to make, well, actually two-handing is a typo there, I'll fix that. We're going to make a new header for our armor, and we're going to have 4 integers, all network variables, that will basically relate to our armor's ID. And as you know, all of our armor items have a specific item ID that we get from the world item database. That's why it's very important you put all of your items in the world item database. Otherwise, for multiplayer, you're going to have some of them not load in. So let's make head equipment ID, body equipment ID, leg equipment ID, and hand equipment ID. And all of these functions, we're going to use onValueChanged, and they're all going to work identically, except we're going to specifically load different pieces of equipment. That's it. Oh, also, let's do isMale while we're here too. That's going to be a bool, and I'm going to set that defaultly to isTrue. All right, so now we can start writing our onValueChanged functions. Like I said, all 4 of these will be identical except for which piece of armor it changes. So I'm just going to begin with making a public void. I'm going to call it on head equipment changed. And then we're going to require it to be an int for the old value and an int for the new value. Now, I'm going to make, since we already run this logic on our player locally, we don't need to call this again if you're not the owner. So we can just start with a check by saying if you're not the owner, then return. Now, if you want to do this differently, you want to run on everybody universally, you can do that and edit the code, so it's like that. But we already run this, or we're going to when we equip our armor from the UI on the actual local player, so we don't need to equip these models again and run this logic again. So if we are the owner in this case, we can just simply return. And then we're going to say head equipment item. Head equipment is equal to the world item database instance.get head equipment by ID, and we're passing the new value. Or alternatively, you can also pass, which I prefer to do, don't know why, the head equipment ID dot value. I just like doing that. It's both the same, honestly. So now if you come down here, next we're going to say if the head equipment does not equal null. So if the world item database has found some, and I'm actually going to rename this to equipment, because when I copy and paste this function 3 more times, it just saves me some typing. So if the equipment does not equal null, we're going to instantiate it. So make a copy of it. This isn't too important if you're not changing anything on the equipment, but just in case, it's always best to instantiate these things. So we're going to say player.player equipment manager load head equipment, and we load the instantiated version of the equipment. Cool. Now, what if it is null? We just call the exact same code, but instead of loading the equipment, we load null, which is good, because then all that's going to do is just unequip the models we already have on our head. All right, so this is going to be the exact same thing here now for the body. So I'm just going to rename this to on body equipment changed. Let's go through this slowly so we don't make any typos. Body equipment changed is equal to get body equipment by ID, and we pass our body equipment ID dot value. So yeah, as I change all these and copy it 2 more times, we're just going to talk about it again. All this is going to do is fetch an item from the world item database, and then we're going to pass that item to our player equipment manager. And from there, like we just made, every item is going to have a set of models attached to it. And then we're just going to load those models from the player equipment manager using this item. So with this logic in mind now, you really could go ahead, if you have a model with some armor onto it, you could go ahead and start implementing the rest of these for your chest and your legs and your hands. You might trip up when you do multiple of them, but it's honestly not difficult at all. Just remember to disable the old ones, and you have to re-enable pieces of your character that are there by default. So like your head and your chest and your arms, etc., etc. But don't worry, because I'm going to cover all this in the next video, maybe the next couple. So we're going to go over it regardless. Now, back on your player manager, make sure you call these on value changes. So we're going to use our right below equipment here. We're going to say player network manager. This is on network spawn, by the way. We're going to say dot head equipment dot ID dot on value changed plus equals player network manager dot on head equipment changed. That's great. And then we're going to do the body equipment on value changed, player network manager on body equipment changed. That's great. And then do the same thing for your hands and then your legs, and then you're good to go. Also, guys, if you have any concerns about the system or any questions or things not clear, please comment below, because in the next video we're going to do a really big deep dive on all the different equipment models, and we're going to use a complex model. So I will be able to answer any concerns. If I have them beforehand too, that's great, because I can kind of give more information on it. Don't forget to go to your on-network despawn and unsubscribe from these on-value changes by putting the minus sign here like so. Alright, so we have one more thing to do. Let's go over here now. Actually, two more things to do, sorry. Right here on load head equipment, if you are the owner and the equipment is null, what you want to do is first check if you're the owner. And then you want to assign the head equipment value here. So player.player network manager head equipment ID.value to -1. Now, why -1? Well, the way our world item database works is there's never going to be an item with -1 in the ID. So -1 will create a null object, which will, on the other end, cause the head equipment to unload. So if you're using the exact same system as me, -1 will never be an ID. This is great. Just use an ID that will never be an item. Have a safe thing here, like mine's always -1 for all my equipment, and that will do the trick. Now, if you pass the check down here, what you want to do again is, if you are the owner, you assign the head equipment ID value to the item ID of the equipment model that was passed here. So we do that by saying player.player.networkmanager.headEquipmentID.value is equal to the equipment.the-item ID, like so. And I'm just going to put this last here in the function, just for neatness sake. It doesn't really matter where it is, as long as it's after the null check. Save that. Now, back on load other player characters when joining server, because remember, this is on value changed, so this only gets called when it's changed. So if you join when somebody already has armor equipped, this isn't going to work. So we add onto our load other player characters when joining server function, we add all of our armor checks. So player network manager on head equipment changed, on body equipment changed, on hand and leg equipment changed, and we pass their respective variables. So head equipment changed gets the head equipment ID value, and then body equipment, the body equipment ID value, etc., etc. And that's it. So now I'm just going to place the hand one here, save this. Now we go into the scene and test it. And I'm going to jump in here. You can see I have a client connected. I'm going to equip a helmet on the client's end. And we're going to use the Knight's helmet A first, and then we'll try B after. So there we go. Equip. Boom. Okay, cool. Working as intended. Awesome. Now I'm going to equip the helmet B, and I'm going to drag over the client window just to show you that this is working. So there we go, B, and now I drag in the client window. You can see the same thing over here. So that's working as intended. That's pretty cool. Now let's try taking it off. Make sure too that the null version works, the -1. So yeah, it works on this end, back in the host end. There you go. Working as intended. There you go, guys. So that is the structure as to how we're going to equip models with our equipment items. Now, I strongly encourage you, if you have a model, to go and try this on your own and see if you can set up all of the model's equipment yourself and include default things like when you unequip a helmet to re-enable your head, your hair. The same thing if you unequip a torso equipment to have a default body that will re-enable, etc., etc. But don't worry, I'm going to cover all this myself in the next video. I will use a complex model from the asset store. And once again, I can't stress enough, do not feel obligated to get a model. Just use some random geo and parent it on our objects under a dummy for now, because this doesn't matter ultimately. If you have the functionality in place, you can always come back and use a real model whenever you have one made or whenever one's ready. So thank you once again, guys, for joining me. I hope you all have a very lovely weekend. A very special thank you to my patrons. I don't run ads on my videos, so it is because of each and every one of you I get to keep doing this, and I love doing this. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. I do hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you guys next week for the next video.